Have you ever felt like you're losing control when it comes to food? Or maybe you often do? Well, you're definitely not alone, because today we are going to be talking about 3 practical skills for those cognitive distortions. That's what therapists call it, but it's essentially negative thinking related directly to binge eating. So make sure you watch to the end to get all 3 tips. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below, because I post, God willing, weekly content on mental health for women, specifically from a Christian and biblical worldview. So if that's something that you find interesting, be sure to do that. All right, like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to talk about 3 very common sort of negative thinking patterns that might be keeping you stuck when it comes to binge eating. The first one is what we call all or nothing thinking. And essentially that just means a lot of times people with binge eating disorders think that it's either feast or famine. You know, they have to just go all in and like fast and not eat for a whole day, or maybe just once a day, or barely eat anything in order to lose weight. And then the fruit of that is eventually binging, because you've deprived your body of nutrition for too long. The practical sort of alternative to that is to remember that and recognize that, hey, you know, this mindset actually is not helping me achieve my goals. So it's really important that I think truthfully and speak to myself in a truthful manner if I want this to change. So practically speaking, that means I need to eat when I'm hungry and stop when I'm full. And if I do this consistently day in and day out, it's likely that I will stop binging. Number 2 is related to just essentially emotional eating. And instead of addressing the emotions that you're feeling in the moment and just sitting with them and riding the wave and allowing stress, anxiety, sadness, whatever emotion it is in that moment, instead of feeling it and recognizing that these emotions come like a wave, you know what I mean? Like they kind of peak and then after a while they kind of die down. And you can find other ways of coping. And coping is, the point of coping is not to run away from the emotion, but to actually sit with it and process it and pray as you go, right? To recognize how you feel and handle it. So when we do negative coping, for example, emotional eating, you're not really addressing the emotions, you're distracting from them. So on a practical side, journaling is a great coping skill to help processing emotions. I actually have, if you want to check out the description link, a free 10-prompt reality journal, which helps you kind of identify the thoughts that you might be struggling with personally when it comes to binge eating. And then just it gives you a prompt on how to reflect on it with a truthful, biblical, realistic mindset that will help you find healing. So journaling is a great way to learn to process emotions and sit down and pray and write it out. Another one that I love is just finding a time to go out for a walk instead of sitting down to emotionally eat. Go outside, go for a prayer walk, and pray and submit to God those emotions that you're feeling, and ask and receive healing and peace and comfort, from God. That's a wonderful way to cope with emotions. And a third one I would encourage is worship. I've heard so many people say that you cannot worry and worship at the same time. So I think pairing the last 2 together would be great, which is praying and submitting all your frustration, your anxiety, and your cares up to God, and then learning to visually in your mind, leave all that worry, the sadness, the frustration, the stress at His feet, and trust that He's going to fill you with peace, and then listen to a worship song. It's just a wonderful spiritual practice that enhances your mental health. The third and final distortion, cognitive distortion or mental mistake, is negative self-talk, or in other words, more specifically, I would say irrational labeling, or just labeling in general. So when we tell ourselves things like, oh my God, I'm so fat, just anything to that, extent. It's just negative name calling or labeling that you place on yourself that leads to all the negative coping that even we talked about earlier with feast and famine and not processing emotions and just getting frustrated with yourself. So instead of sort of beating yourself up mentally in that way, it's important to practice biblical truth when it comes to your body image, and remembering that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. So you can take care of yourself. You are precious in God's eyes, no matter what your size, right? No matter how much you weigh. But two things can be true at the same time, right? It can be true that you are beautiful, you are wonderfully and fearfully made, and that your body's a temple of the Holy Spirit. And it can be true too that you want to take care of yourself and honor your temple and treat it well. And that includes dealing with these negative thinking patterns that we're talking about and trying something new, because if it hasn't been working, then why continue down that path? It's time to try something new. In conclusion, I hope you found those 3 tips helpful. If you have any questions or want to share your thoughts or struggles in the comments below, please do so. I will give you encouragement, but remember, I can't give mental health or medical advice in the comments, but I'd be happy to give you encouragement. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and if you want that journal, the link will be also in the comments, or rather the description.